I put in a certain amount of effort, and that effort now provides a level of satisfaction even before I get my reward. And that's the key thing that I'm trying to get across here. Okay, we're going to talk about the relationship between effort and satisfaction because there's a very direct relationship. And this is actually a very meaningful thing for you to know if you're leading people or just if you're kind of muddling through the world yourself. So there's a lot of people out there who find their jobs dissatisfying. One of the reasons they find their jobs dissatisfying is because they're not putting in the proper effort. Now, there are certain circumstances where a person is literally overworked and their effort is tremendous and they're underpaid and it's an obtrusive circumstance. But that's not the norm here, at least in the United States of America and in Canada. Generally speaking, particularly with some of our laws right now, people are protected when doing very low quality, non very effort oriented work and being able to keep their jobs for various reasons. And yet they're dissatisfied. So, why in the world are we dissatisfied when we don't actually put effort into something? Because there's no actual reward in that. So, people might find it exciting to win the lottery, but it's very different when you actually built something and then maybe sold your own company, or you earned money and now it's in your hand as opposed to somebody just giving it to you. We all know this. There's a certain sense of that where we know that if we earn something, it's better. For example, a person cheats on a test or cheats their way through college and they get their degree anyway, and their heart of hearts, they know they cheated. And as a result, they didn't actually earn it. Because they didn't earn it, they spend their entire life actually trying to justify themselves because they have a false, resume. So it's important for us to recognize this whole relationship between effort and satisfaction. One of the reasons that I say this for leaders is because if you want to be an effective leader, you want to make sure that your team's satisfied. You want to have satisfied employees, people who are really happy with their job. So you need to make sure that you're leading them in the effort. So a lot of weak leaders go out there and they want to retain their people and they want their people to be happy. So what do? They reduce standards constantly. They don't tell them the bad news of the bad work that they're doing. They don't let them know that there's a consequence to that bad work that they're doing. And so they just kind of like placate that particular person. Not everybody. Some people are immediately harsh right away and they're too harsh. I get that too. But there's a placating that takes place way too often in way too many places. And people feel that it's actually like a righteousness. And one of the mistakes that happens is a lot of people who are Christians in particular think that, very vastly mistaken, by the way, that it's a Christian principle to let people behave badly at work because, you're supposed to forgive all the time. Well, there's a certain line that can't be crossed and there's a reduction of justice that takes place. And as a Christian, you're standing up for justice, even though you have mercy. And a result of that, sometimes you have to give people the bad news that they're fired. Anyway, you want to make sure that people are satisfied in their work. And the way that you do that is to make sure that they're putting in the appropriate effort to get the job done. Now, at the same time, you want to make sure that there's an outcome for them that when they get the job done, actually feels good. There's a reward that's actually there. That reward, my dad and I were just talking about this. He was talking about, some of the work that he used to do with his hands, even though he graduated from college as an engineer and he spent his time as an engineer. And I build businesses, so I'm not actually raising hammer myself. But when I was in college, I landscaped and he did a lot of construction. And throughout our lives together, we did projects together anyway on the side just for fun and satisfaction and also taking care of our own homes, right? And he just talked about the satisfaction that comes from being able to stop and see that work that you did actually with your hands. I get the same satisfaction when I build a business, even though it's not with my hands. I can stop and sit back and I can see that work. But when we can see what it is that we've done in some way, shape, or form, we can have a measurement about it that gives us satisfaction. It's important for us to know that we have actually been productive. We actually did something. We began here, there was a problem that needed to be solved, and we solved that problem, and we can look back and we can see that that problem was solved. It's not always easy to do in every job, especially when you look at it on a daily basis. I mean, if you're an attorney and you're fighting a big case and there's justice involved and you're trying to get there, you might feel a little closer today than you did yesterday. But at the end of the day, you could have done your best and maybe it wasn't a great judge, or maybe there was just a loophole and you lose and the justice isn't served and you feel like you spent all this time and this effort and you didn't really get anything done from a productive sense. So there are times where we're challenged by that, no doubt about it. But we have to do whatever we can to make that connection for ourselves, as well as leaders for the people that we have on our team, to see the effort and the satisfaction that comes with a result. So how do you measure it? So give people measurable means. So one of the things that I did working with independent contractors, especially because if you're working with an independent contractor, I mean, obviously if you're working with a contractor, you contract somebody to build out your bathroom, they're going to see the work that they did. But a lot of companies use an independent contractor relationship. And one of the challenges of this is that if you're going to do it by the letter of the law, which you should, you want to make sure that they have complete autonomy. They make their decisions. They work in their own way, the way that they want to work. There are some things that they need to do in order to follow company procedures and processes, obviously, but they have the autonomy to make their own decisions, to work when they want, how much they want, as long as they're accomplishing the relationship that they have with the organization by way of fulfilling the duties of the contract. They've got a lot of autonomy. So you can't work with an independent contractor like you work with an employee, which is basically, as an employee, there is this kind of general overall sense of, if you don't get the job done, you're going to be fired. And everybody knows that, even if the culture isn't harsh that way. It's a reality that we all know as human beings when we're in an employee setting, right? With an independent contractor, it's different than that. It's the type of thing where you really need to use encouragement and milk and honey in order to get them to want to do the things that it is they want to do. And the consequence of not getting the work done for most independent contractors is that they themselves suffer by way of not actually having income or revenue, and that's a very real consequence. But there's a short-term thing that has to take place. So I would just give people a suggested measurement for understanding whether or not they're performing at a level that would allow them to be successful. And I always define it for them. I say, you probably want to know at the end of the day, did I do a good job? I'll tell you how you know if you did a good job. And it's a little bit like losing weight or getting in shape. You would say, did I do a good job this way? Yes, you avoided the carbohydrates and you did the prescribed exercises. Even if today you didn't lose any size on your belt, okay, you don't feel any different, you might even feel more tired, I will let you know that what's happening inside your metabolism is actually effective. What's happening inside your ability to get rid of that visceral fat is actually effective. You don't need to see or know the results to know that they are there. So if you want to know you did a good job, eat this and act this way. Okay, good, did a good job. So in business, it's the same way. If you're going to go out there and you're going to establish maybe a franchise, or you're going to build a business, and you want to know, well, am I doing a good job? You would just need to know what effort needs to be put in on a daily basis in order for it to eventually add up to something bigger. So let's say your independent role is a sales role. And, when you do 10 appointments, you make one sale. And if you make one sale in a 1 week period of time, that's enough for you to do very well in the business. Well, the question you would have to ask is, what does it take to make one sale? Well, it takes 10 appointments. Okay, well, what does it take to get 10 appointments? Well, it may take 10 phone calls to get one appointment, in which case you need to make 100 phone calls in order to get 10 appointments. That would mean you need to make 20 phone calls a week, and that would get you 10 appointments, and that would get you one sale. So basically, you just need to know, if you make your 20 phone calls today, you're doing a good job. And all different types of businesses have different metrics. Those are not metrics for any one of the companies that I actually have, but those are metrics that a person needs to kind of follow, so that at the end of the day, they can say, I have satisfaction. I put in a certain amount of effort, and that effort now provides a level of satisfaction even before I get my reward. And that's the key thing that I'm trying to get across here, is that, sure, if you put in a certain amount of effort and the satisfaction is at that moment, somebody throws a stack of money at you and sends you, has a parade for you, well, you would be able to relatively easy see, whenever I get the job done, I have a parade and a bunch of money thrown at me. Okay, fine. But that's not how it works for most of us. For most of us, we have a particular grind that we need to work through before we would see any sort of like gratitude, thanks, reward, compensation for the work that we're doing. And so each day we have to find a way, either in our own effort, because nobody's doing it for us. Maybe you don't have that good boss, or maybe you are the independent contractor, you work for yourself, to say that if I follow these particular strategies and I do them on a daily basis, even if I don't see the reward that day, I can feel satisfied that I've made progress. This is very much like farming, okay? When you sow the seeds and you water, okay, you don't see the reward right away. It takes a while before you see it. And then all of a sudden you see it and it comes up in satisfaction. Once it comes in satisfaction, it doesn't mean that you actually have the result. You need then to harvest that. and then to prepare it, or as a farmer, you need to sell it. So there's processes to go through these, but each one of them has its certain level of reward when you can see it moving forward. So my encouragement to you, if you're leading others, is to make sure that they are putting in the effort, that you're leading them in the effort, that you make sure that they can see that there is a reward that is at the end of the effort. But if that reward is something that's set apart weeks, months, years from then, that they can see how that daily effort that they do should lead to satisfaction because it puts them on the path. And if you're not leading others, you need to do that for yourself so that you can do two things: work harder and be happier.